Symbols are the language of the subconscious. A flag, a slogan, a color. It bypasses logic and touches identity. Hitler mastered this. He didn't just lead Germany, he reprogrammed its psychology. He created rituals, salutes, uniforms, and more importantly, a narrative that painted him as savior and others as threats. Fear, he understood, is the most loyal servant of power. Once people fear the same enemy, they'll forgive any cruelty from their leaders. They'll even become instruments of that cruelty themselves. Modern leaders don't burn books. They flood you with noise. Distraction replaces destruction. You're too overwhelmed to think critically, too emotionally charged to see patterns, too divided to unite against the real manipulators. And the manipulation works best when it feels like loyalty. The brain releases dopamine when belonging is affirmed. So we cling to our groups, flags, hashtags, never realizing we're worshipping carefully engineered symbols. Emotions are puppet strings of leaders. Logic has never moved nations. Emotion has world leaders understand what psychologists call emotional contagion, the ability of emotions to spread through groups like viruses. They don't convince you to think, they make you feel. And once you feel, your rational mind shuts down. When fear spikes, the amygdala overrides logic. When hope rises, dopamine makes you trust. And when guilt or moral outrage takes hold, you can be led anywhere as long as it feels righteous. Every televised speech, every viral post, every campaign slogan is engineered to target specific chemicals in your brain. Words are no longer just sounds. They are neurochemical weapons. Take the Cold War. Two superpowers, both claiming to protect freedom, both manufacturing fear of annihilation to justify their dominance. The people weren't the enemy. The emotion was. Fear became currency, control the profit. But here's the truth Machiavelli left behind for those who read between his lines. You cannot escape manipulation, but you can rise above it. Power isn't about avoiding influence. It's about seeing it, dissecting it, and using it. The average man reacts. The Machiavellian observes. Once you see how easily perception shapes belief, you start to notice the small manipulations everywhere. In headlines designed to polarize, in leaders who smile too perfectly, in slogans that sound comforting but hide control. Psychological awakening begins when emotion ends. The moment you stop feeling what they want you to feel, you begin to see what they never wanted you to see. Every empire depends on your blindness. Every ruler fears your awareness, because awareness is disobedience. And in a world ruled by perception, to see clearly is the most dangerous act of all. You've seen how the illusion is built, how power doesn't dominate the body, but the mind. But the question remains, why do people obey? What is it inside the human psyche that craves submission, that kneels even when unchained? In the next chapter, we'll go deeper into the psychology of control, where obedience isn't forced, it's chosen. Every ruler understands one truth Machiavelli whispered centuries ago. Men are driven by two things, fear and self-interest. To control them, you don't need armies. You only need to master those two levers. And once you do, they will chain themselves, smile, and call it freedom. Human beings are born submissive. We enter the world dependent on parents, teachers, authority. We crave approval, safety, and order. That craving never leaves us. Psychologists discovered this long before modern politics weaponized it. In 1961, Stanley Milgram at Yale University ran one of the most disturbing experiments in history. Volunteers were told to administer electric shocks to strangers under the supervision of a man in a lab coat. Every time the learner answered wrong, they had to increase the voltage up to lethal levels. Most people obeyed. Why? Because authority told them to. Milgram's conclusion was terrifying. People will commit atrocities if an authority figure legitimizes it. The conscience dissolves in the presence of command. World leaders know this. Every military salute, every uniform, every title is a symbol designed to bypass thought and trigger obedience. The brain equates structure with safety. We follow not because we trust authority, but because we fear chaos. Machiavelli wrote, "Men are so simple and so subject to present necessities that he who deceives will always find someone who will let himself be deceived." He understood. Obedience is not forced. It's desired. The masses want someone to decide for them, to remove the burden of thought, to give meaning to their uncertainty, and that psychological hunger is where power feeds. I am going to tell you which never heard before, the dark triad of leadership. Not all leaders obey the same moral code as their followers. In fact, the most effective ones don't. They operate from what psychologists now call the dark triad: Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy. Machiavellianism: strategic manipulation, emotional detachment, control through perception. Narcissism: the charm, confidence, and charisma that make people trust and admire. Psychopathy: the coldness to act without emotional hesitation. Combine all three, and you get the blueprint of dominance. History is full of these figures. Alexander the Great, charming in speech, merciless in war, and obsessed with legacy. Napoleon, brilliant, narcissistic, ruthless with timing. Churchill, Stalin, even modern CEOs, balancing cruelty with charisma. They understood. People don't follow goodness. They follow certainty. The dark triad provides exactly that. The ability to make decisions unclouded by guilt. 2. Lie without flinching. To manipulate without remorse, and to smile while doing it. To the masses, they appear strong. To the aware, they appear calculating. But to themselves, they appear necessary. That's the most dangerous kind of leader, the one who believes his manipulation serves a higher cause. Leaders are the mirror of manipulation. The most effective manipulation doesn't come from dominance. It comes from reflection. Leaders don't command people to follow. They reflect what people already want to believe. They act as mirrors, amplifying the desires, fears, and insecurities of the crowd. The people don't see the manipulator. They see themselves, projected through the leader's performance. This is the principle of mirroring psychology. Humans trust those who seem similar to them. A skilled manipulator mirrors tone, emotion, and belief until you feel seen, then leads you wherever he wants. Julius Caesar mastered this art. He knew the people of Rome didn't want a dictator. They wanted a savior. So he gave them the illusion of choice, speaking their anger, embodying their hope, until they begged him to take control. Modern politicians do the same. They scan social media to understand what people crave, then repackage those desires into polished speeches and campaigns. It's not leadership, it's psychological puppetry. And once the crowd sees themselves in their ruler, they'll defend him more fiercely than they'd defend the truth. Remember this rule: divide, distract, dominate. The easiest way to control a population isn't through unity, it's through division. A divided crowd cannot rebel. They're too busy fighting among themselves. Machiavelli advised princes to maintain control by keeping subjects in controlled conflict. A wise ruler will cause his subjects to have need of him. That principle hasn't died, it's evolved. Today, division is digital. Social media amplifies outrage, tribalism, and moral superiority. You are given labels, sides, identities, and the moment you pick one, you're trapped. When people see their ideological group as good and others as evil, their critical thinking shuts off. The psychological term is in-group bias, the instinct to favor one's own tribe and demonize outsiders. Leaders don't stop it, they feed it. They fund both sides, stoke both fires, then present themselves as the only ones who can restore peace. It's a perfect manipulation loop. Create chaos, promise order, gain power, repeat. Rome fell not from foreign invasion, but from internal division, and every empire since has followed the same cycle. Because as long as people are divided, they can never realize they're all ruled by the same invisible hand. Let's have a sight on silence, surveillance, and submission control has evolved. It no longer needs violence. It needs visibility. In ancient times, kings ruled through fear of punishment. Now they rule through fear of exposure. Every word you post, every thought you share, every bluff you reveal is recorded, analyzed, and categorized. George Orwell imagined it in 1984. We volunteered for it. Surveillance is no longer tyranny, it's convenience. We trade privacy for comfort, our data for dopamine, and in doing so, we hand them the map to our minds. But surveillance is only half the equation. The other half is social control through shame. You are no longer punished for thinking differently. You are cancelled, ridiculed, excluded. Humans fear social rejection more than death. That fear keeps them obedient. When you know every opinion can be judged, you stop speaking, and silence becomes self-imposed slavery. Machiavelli would have admired this new form of dominance. He wrote that fear maintains power better than love. But modern rulers discovered something greater, the fear of losing love. They don't need to burn your books anymore. They just make you too afraid to write them. Where true power goes. The greatest trick of manipulation is to make control look like chaos, so you never realize it's orchestration. Observe how leaders present themselves. Posture straight, eyes steady, pauses perfectly timed, nothing accidental, every movement calibrated for dominance. Body language experts call it power optics. It's how presence becomes control without a word. Churchill's cigar wasn't just a habit. It was a symbol of composure under fire. Obama's calm tone wasn't just personality. It was deliberate tempo control. Putin's silence, Trump's unpredictability, Xi's stoic restraint. Each a psychological theater. Power isn't what they say. It's how they make you feel when they say nothing. Neuroscientists call it the authority effect. When people perceive confidence, their brains suppress skepticism. Certainty hypnotizes, doubt paralyzes. That's why manipulation isn't always hidden. It's performed in front of you until you stop questioning and start obeying. You've seen how the mind is shaped, how leaders mold fear into faith and obedience into virtue. But there's one final truth Machiavelli left for the few who dare to rule their own lives. You cannot destroy manipulation. You can only master it. In the next chapter, we cross the final threshold. from victim to strategist, from the manipulated to the manipulator. Welcome to the art of mastering the game. You've seen how power hides behind illusion, how fear keeps men obedient, and control disguises itself as morality. Now you stand where few ever do, at the edge of awakening. But here's the paradox Machiavelli never said aloud. Once you see the game, you are no longer free from it. You either play or be played. First you have to think like the prince. Niccolo Machiavelli never wanted to create monsters. He wanted to create survivors. When he wrote The Prince in 1513, it wasn't a book of evil. It was a mirror held up to power. He simply described what leaders already did. Without masks, it is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. That line wasn't advice. It was diagnosis. Machiavelli was exposing human nature. That love is conditional, but fear is loyal. To think like the prince means to abandon illusions of fairness. It means understanding that morality changes shape depending on who benefits from it. And that sometimes being good is the most selfish form of cowardice. He studied the ruthless because he knew the world does not reward purity. It rewards perception. Power doesn't ask, "Are you right?" It asks, "Are you useful?" The first step to mastering the game isn't domination, it's clarity. You cannot outthink manipulation until you see the emotional levers behind every human action, including your own. And here comes the first twist. The same psychological triggers leaders use on the masses, you use on yourself. You obey your fears, worship your doubts, and manipulate your own potential every day. The tyrant outside is nothing compared to the one whispering inside. To rule others, you must first overthrow your inner dictator. Don't go for emotional detachment, because it is the weapon of kings. The second rule of power is detachment. Emotion is the favorite tool of manipulation, and the first weakness of those who seek control. When you react, you lose. When you respond, you rule. This is not coldness, it's control. The Stoics knew this long before psychology named it emotional regulation. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." Machiavelli echoed the same in politics. A ruler must appear compassionate, but act with calculation. To detach is to stop being predictable, because predictability is control. Once people know how you'll react, they own you. Leaders, lovers, enemies, all manipulate through emotion, guilt, anger, flattery, or fear. But once you become emotionally indifferent to their tactics, they lose the map to your mind. And here comes the second twist. Detachment doesn't just protect you. It isolates you. The more you understand people's motives, the harder it becomes to connect with them. You stop seeing friends. You see strategies. You stop hearing love. You hear leverage. That's the Machiavellian curse. Awareness costs innocence. Power demands loneliness. But if you can bear that silence, you become untouchable. You have to become strategic ruthlessness. The third law, control demands cruelty, but not chaos. Machiavelli taught that mercy without strength invites betrayal. Cruelty, when used with precision, creates order. Alexander executed deserters publicly, not out of hatred, but to stabilize his army. Steve Jobs fired loyal employees without hesitation, not from ego, but from vision. Both understood the same truth. Ruthlessness isn't violence, it's prioritization. To be ruthless means knowing when to cut, and why. It means killing what weakens you. Habits, emotions, relationships, illusions, and yet here lies another twist. The moment you master ruthlessness, you start becoming what you once despised. Every villain began as a protector, someone who believed cruelty was temporary, for the greater good. But power always whispers, just one more compromise, and slowly, principles turn into armor for the ego. That's the real danger of Machiavellian mastery. The line between control and corruption fades, until you no longer manipulate to survive. You manipulate to feel alive. The test of true power is not how much control you gain, but how much of yourself you refuse to lose. Become the personality of influence. Architecture, manipulation is not chaos, it's design. The great persuaders of history didn't rely on chance. They built architectures of influence. They understood the laws of human attention. People believe what feels scarce. They trust what resembles authority. They follow consistency more than truth. These are not opinions. They're psychological constants. Churchill used rhythm and contrast in speech to hypnotize audiences. Elon Musk uses mystery and scarcity to make belief feel exclusive. Every influencer, priest, or politician follows the same ancient formula: control what people focus on, and you control what they ignore. Words are architecture. Silence is interior design. The more space you leave between your words, the more their mind decorates it with meaning. But here comes the next twist. The better you become at influence, the more you start to doubt authenticity itself. Every interaction becomes calculation. You start to wonder, do people admire me or the image I built? And that question is dangerous, because the moment you ask it, you realize you've become your own illusion and change your perception. Is power? Truth doesn't rule the world, perception does. Human beings are irrational. We don't respond to reality. We respond to representation. The man who can shape perception owns reality itself. That's why rulers care more for image than essence. Why they stage press conferences, wear specific colors, or smile at the exact right second on camera. They're crafting psychological frames. Because perception shapes belief faster than facts ever could. The psychologist Robert Cialdini called this the halo effect. When someone appears competent or confident in one area, our brain assumes they are trustworthy in all others. That's why Machiavelli advised rulers to appear virtuous, because the appearance becomes truth in the eyes of the masses. But the twist: perception can destroy just as easily as it builds. The same crowd that worships your strength will crucify your silence. Public favor is not loyalty, it's addiction. Once they stop feeling awe, they will feel envy. Once they feel envy, they will turn. That's why true Machiavellians don't seek to be loved or feared. They seek to be unreadable. Mystery is the final shield of power. If they cannot predict you, they cannot control you. And don't forget to follow your idol, the Machiavellian Renaissance. You've come full circle, from blindness to awareness, from being controlled to understanding control. But here's the final twist. The truth Machiavelli never wrote, but lived. No one ever truly escapes the game. The moment you learn to manipulate, the game begins to manipulate you. You start playing for dominance, for recognition, for validation. And before you realize it, you've become another actor in the illusion you swore to destroy. That's the paradox of power. The more you master it, the more it consumes you. Because control is addictive, and addiction is the highest form of slavery. So what's the escape? Awareness without attachment. Play the game, but don't become the game. Use manipulation, but never need it. See through illusion, but never lose your humanity. The Renaissance wasn't just a rebirth of art. It was a rebirth of consciousness. To be Machiavellian today doesn't mean to be ruthless. It means to see the mechanics of manipulation and rise above them. You can't stop leaders from deceiving. You can't stop the world from playing its games. But you can stop being the pawn, because in a world ruled by perception, awareness is rebellion. The prince doesn't need a throne. He only needs clarity. And when clarity meets strategy, power becomes inevitable. Remember this, the world you see is not the world that is. Every smile hides a calculation. Every truth hides a motive. You cannot control the storm, but you can learn to move within it, silent, deliberate, unseen. Because in the end, power doesn't belong to those who rule nations. It belongs to those who rule themselves. Welcome to the Renaissance of the ruthless mind. Machiavelli would be proud.